session. When we talk about bonding and rapport, yeah, I teed it up by saying, hey, a lot of salespeople already know bonding and rapport. And I think that is probably a generally safe statement. I think we're all pretty good at doing bonding and rapport. So we'll talk about some of the basics of bonding and rapport. In addition, we'll talk about maybe some of the elements that we don't always think about when it comes to bonding and rapport. For starters, who wants to start us out and volunteer and tell us what they think bonding and rapport is all about? Scott, jump in. You can jump right in.
Yeah.
Nobody unmuted but you.
I think bonding and rapport, I think it serves two purposes. One is to make yourself memorable to someone so they remember to get back in touch with you. And two is to start building those lines of trust and start building those, like that foundation of trust is what I mean. I don't know why I said
Sure. Sure. Who else wants to add to that? Anybody?
Finding ways to make connections initially and then strengthen them kind of through iterative dialogue and discussion, and just finding ways to build upon that foundation of that initial connection.
Awesome. Ben, I don't always hear that. It is an iterative process and you're always trying to build that out, that bonding and rapport. Anyone else want to add?
Dialogue, I wrote it down.
What's that?
Iterative dialogue, I wrote it down. Love it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. My observation is most salespeople, and by the way, I say this all the time. When I say most salespeople, I'm not saying it about you guys. I'm saying in general, think that bonding and rapport is it just starts at the beginning. You do a little bit of bonding and rapport, life is good, but it is an iterative dialogue to continuously build that trust throughout the conversation. Anybody else have anything to add to it? Prakash, jump right in.
This kind of fits in with what you had said earlier about it's not the circular thing, but it is like parallel lines. So bonding and rapport is not just that one little piece in the beginning of the circle that you have, but it is all through the process, right? And I put three of them in that category. Bonding and rapport was one of them. Then the looking for the list that you have, but the upfront contract is also throughout, because you're still trying to maintain the contract throughout. And the last thing was the what you say post sales, but that's also throughout the whole process, because you have to really kind of work it throughout the process. Isn't that right?
100%. And actually, I will not be as quick as you just were there, and I should have had that up. For those that are new to the Sandler process, it will teach you all that. But for everybody else that's been here, if you think about the Sandler process, bonding and rapport happens throughout the entire sales process, upfront contracts and post-sale. They're always continuously happening. From a bonding and rapport, so excellent job. And I think that that's important. Ben, I really like what you said, because I think, again, most salespeople, when they go through the selling process, they drop off on the bonding and rapport. We sometimes get a little bit too comfortable with our prospects and maybe our clients and say something that could be inappropriate and maybe disrupt the flow or disrupt the conversation. So back out to the group again. What are some of the things that you're doing to create better rapport in a conversation?
Lots of listening. Lots of listening.
Absolutely, Allison, awesome. We do a lot of listening, so we got to be interested in what the other folks are saying. What else are we doing to build bonding and rapport?
Asking questions and understanding more about them, not just their role.
Excellent. Maybe looking at their LinkedIn before you get there, of course.
Finding common ground.
Tony, I really like what you said, asking questions beyond the role. And that's another area. I think people go way off the mark of the role and want to only talk about other stuff, or they get so focused on the role they forget about the other stuff that creates that common ground and those real connections. What are you guys doing in the field? How are you creating rapport?
You got to make observations.
You got to make, and Lewis, I know you were getting, well, I don't know why we're getting such feedback. It's probably Brian, maybe you're close to Brian. No, but Brian's muted. What kinds of observations are we making? Lewis, you can jump in, or somebody could help Lewis out here. What observations do we make when we're having
This
conversations?
is the interactive part, guys. This is where we all jump in and give ideas. That didn't work.
I'm going to call on somebody. Stephanie, what else are we doing? What observations are we making when we talk to somebody?
We're also, when building rapport, but also understanding like their role. Are they the decision maker? Like getting their feel for what they're looking for, but also their role in the whole project or the process.
Okay. How about we go back to the observations? We're on Zoom. We're on Zoom right now. What observations can we be making?
Another one is people like, or if they're comfortable with being on camera, or if they're not comfortable being on camera. Like I find that with my clients, sometimes that they don't want to be on camera, and you go on camera with, even if they're not, so they can see who you are, and that it opens a different level of a relationship.
100%.
For observations, I also, on that theme, like I look for, well, what's the age of the person I'm talking to, right? What's their generational perspective? I look for how talkative they are, or how open they are. You know, what kind of, where do they fall in the DISC profile?
No, you're jumping too far ahead now, Jess. Yeah, all these things. Go ahead, Andy. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's generational perspective. Ben got the first one. Generational perspective is awesome from Jess. Thank you. Nuggets.
Yeah. Are they talkative? Are they, open to having a conversation? Are they a little bit closed? I want to understand their DISC style. We can blend that all in here. And also from an observational standpoint, in the world of in person, we see things on people's walls. We see things in their background. In the world of Zoom, one of the rules that we like to apply, we're not always great at it, but especially in a sales call, camera on. We need your camera on. So I can pick up things. If Prakash has something in his background, or Brian has something in his background that I can identify with, I might make that a little bit of a conversation starter. So no real great breakthroughs here, but actually a great foundation of really what we're going to start talking about. So any questions before I continue on here? Nothing. All right, so I'm going to go in a little bit of an order. And the first one is, again, I don't think it's earth-shattering, but I get a lot of people going, oh my God, I never thought of that. Who's familiar with matching and mirroring? I see a couple of,
Yeah.
Ben, Jess. Ben, what do you know about matching and mirroring?
So I think this is probably easier done in person, but it's observing body language. And, if we're sitting on opposite sides of the table, having a discussion, and maybe you do one of these, then I might, on the other side of the table, be like, yeah, when I think about that, and I'll mirror what you're doing with your body language.
Okay.
It can extend to, your tone and the cadence and how you're talking as well. But it's trying to create an alignment with the people you're talking to, because at the end of the day, we like people who are like ourselves. And the more we can make ourselves seem similar, the better our odds are of kind of enhancing our standing in that person's perspective.
So for those that know me pretty well at this point, usually when there's new faces on the training, my favorite line, and Allison has fallen for this line once, it will never happen again, is I say, hey, Ben, welcome to the class. Are you ready to do the presentation? And then the people look at me and they go, I have to do a presentation, like, what are you talking about? But Ben, based on what you just said, we want you to actually run the class today, because that's exactly what bonding and rapport is all about. People like to do business who they like, who they trust, finding similarities, and that's what makes those connections. And Sandler has a line. By the way, this is an actual salesperson's line. 90% of statistics that salespeople make up are completely fabricated, or that they spew out are completely fabricated. But it's Sandler, one of the lines that I've heard over the years is the 70% of your sales results are based on bonding and rapport. I've looked that number up. There's no scientific proof to prove that out, but what Ben said, we should all believe bonding and rapport makes a big difference. On the matching and mirroring standpoint, I'll share a bit of a story. Years ago, when I would hire people in my previous job, I had a job candidate come in, and we had been taught matching and mirroring and all that stuff. And the candidate came in and completely overdid the matching and mirroring. And it was completely like, it was like, every move I made, this individual made, and ultimately we didn't hire that person. And it might have been a little bit overdone. Yeah, Prakash, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that sometimes the matching and mirroring might appear like aping and making fun of somebody, and that's happened to me.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It's like it was two staged. But I want us to build this in. From matching and mirroring standpoint, it's a great way to see if rapport is built. And it's a great way, as Ben laid out, to make a connection. So Ben, if we're selling to somebody, and Ben, I loved your expression. So Ben, give me the little handle piece. So let's imagine I was selling to Ben, and he was my prospect. And Ben, just make a hand gesture of some sort, and I'll mirror you a little bit.
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be a hand gesture, you know. So sometimes it can be just like a thoughtful thing. And maybe I'll kick back. So let me think about that.
Yeah, and I might go into a little bit of this to try to make that subconscious connection to Ben. And that's the way that, and if I do it very subtle, and I like Ben, you did the hand movement before. If I do that, it's bringing me a little bit closer to Ben. Ben's hopefully feeling a connection. Here's the flip. Let's imagine I were selling to Ben and he did a few of those things. I, as the salesperson, I might go like this. Ben, copy me for a second. If I see Ben do that, that's a pretty good signal that we've made some sort of connection. So not only am I matching and mirroring his moves, but what I might do is throw out a couple of challenges to see what happens. And it's interesting, who's out in the field? And Ben, you also said probably a little bit easier in person, correct?
Yeah.
Who's out in the field doing sales now, live sales calls? Multiple decision makers in any of those cases? So when we are in front of those folks, we can match and mirror, and you can keep an eye on the individual or the audience. But what's really interesting for those that sell to multiple people, let's imagine you've got 3 buyers in the room. And you're sitting there and you're doing a little bit of that matching and mirroring, and all of a sudden you cross your leg and you look and you watch 3 of those people or 2 of the 3 cross their legs. It's a great indicator. Do we have that bond? Do we have that rapport in that moment? In training sessions, had this been in person, I would have actually done a few of that matching and mirroring. And what would happen is we've got 21 people, including myself and Andy, on today's call. I can almost assure you that 17 of you would be doing the same body movement in that moment. And that's a great way to identify, are we creating that rapport? So think of that. The matching and mirroring is not just about me making that connection into their world. It's about drawing them back into my world to test to see if we're creating that. And all of the pace and all of that stuff, we'll get into that in a few moments. But we've got to be aware that is a powerful tool to build out rapport. And Ben nailed it. People buy from people who they like. People buy from people who they trust. We've got to always believe that. And the more they like us and the more they trust us, the more pain we're going to get out of them, the better conversations we're going to have from folks. And it's an iterative process. Andy, did you want to say something?
Well, I was just gonna say, my suggestion is not to test by picking your nose. I'm gonna throw that in.
That's a good
It's
one.
always worked for me though.
There you go. That's a good one. All right. Here's one of my favorite things. So again, I don't think anything earth shattering. The one element that I think is sometimes game changing for people is to be able to run that little bonding and rapport test. And by the way, if you don't have rapport in a selling situation, it's okay to come back and forego getting pain, but come back and keep developing that rapport. There's no rule that says bonding and rapport has to occur in the first 7 minutes of a phone call or of a conversation.
Hey, Dave, question too, right? Because I would guess that the matching and mirroring also involves like matching someone's energy. Like I'm typically kind of a high energy person and and sometimes you encounter people that are a little more flat or whatever it is. I guess it's important to kind of bring yourself to that level, even if it's like, you get what I'm saying here? Kind of like a flat, less interested type of.
Jess, as we go through this, and you brought up several weeks ago, hey, we should all have our disc labels on our names, and that would be awesome. But Jess is giving us something that absolutely we're going to play into. I want to match the energy and the tonality and the pace of my prospect. It's my job as we build our arsenal and our sales development tools. It becomes my job as the salesperson to meet the buyer in their world, not the other way around. And most salespeople are like, it's my world. They got to come into my world. No, we want to put on that hat that Jess is expressing. If they've got high energy, even if I'm not a high energy person, I need to raise it up because I got to meet them in their world. That's my role as a salesperson. Prakash, you were going to say something?
Yes, the question I had was, you brought up something and I wanted to see if you can elaborate on that. You said that you need the rapport, then the pain comes through. I don't get that.
Yeah, so let's imagine, for not everybody here has gone through the pain conversation that we have at Sandler. And really, when you think about it, what we're trying to do there is uncover the why behind why somebody would want to do business. And we're trying to create an emotional connection there. If I do not have rapport in that situation, there is little to no chance that a prospect will feel comfortable enough with me to share that information. And that's why, Prakash, we've got to create rapport so that, and we do that through questioning, but the only way that somebody shares us their real personal reasons why they want to do something or make a change is because we've built a bond where they say, I can trust you and I'm comfortable sharing my personal challenges with you. Because sometimes people made a mistake, sometimes they've done, made bad decisions along the way, whatever it is. Our job is to make them feel as comfortable as possible so they share that with us. And Ben, I just caught your statistic, 60% of the time we're right or something. I'll get it wrong.
So my other comment was, there's an interesting parallel to that idea of you got to bring your energy down to your target with DJs and dance floors. And so if you really want to be just a smoking DJ and get the dance floor jumping, you can't just put on a banging track and expect it to happen, right? You got to size up the audience and the dance floor, and they're going to have a mood and a tempo, and you initially align what type of music you play to that tempo. But over time, so you establish that connection, right? There's your mirroring and matching. And then it becomes the iterative process, and you slowly start building the tempo and ratcheting up. And before you know it, you're kind of like the Pied Piper, and you can whip the crowd up into a real frenzy.
I love that. I love that example, writing it down.
Are you a DJ, Ben?
I dabbled a little bit. I can't say I've ever really worked a huge crowd up into a frenzy, but I've done it at small scale with some friends and some backyard barbecue type things.
Excellent.
I
Love
like
it.
your Pied Piper reference.
Thank you.
Yes, definitely.
Rapping Patty Ben. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good rap name for you. Ben, that is a great analogy. I'm gonna go one step further now. What I'd like to talk about, and then we're gonna get a little bit into DISC, not too heavy, but I want to talk about something called the okay, not okay theory. And again, once again, this is, I think, slight edge stuff. I think something that we'll all know, but maybe it's never been put into words or training. In general, 98% of the population wants to feel okay about themselves. And for most humans, for them to feel better about themselves, what often do people do to make themselves feel better than other people? It's a tough question. I'm not asking it great. I'll add to it in a second. Think about it. How do most people make themselves feel better about a bad situation?
I'll jump in. I think probably by comparison. I mean, you can say, hey, it can always be worse.
It can always be worse. Hey, at least I'm not as bad as that person over there. Which is why we often watch reality TV shows, because we love to see train wrecks. And when there's a train wreck on TV, Allison smiling, when there's a train wreck on TV, we go, at least that's not me. And that's what we start to do, is we start to make those comparisons. And in general, that's what we're often looking to do. In the world of sales, we often bring that belief system into conversations. Prakash, were you going to say something, or you just hit a button?
No, I'm okay, thanks. I was
Okay.
just writing down something. I put down a pen. I think that made a noise.
All right. So funny. This is a funny story. At least I found it funny. Years ago, training a company, a printing and graphics company. They were pretty sizable, and we taught them bonding and rapport. And maybe 6 or 8 weeks later, I was sitting down with the CEO, and he said, "Remember the bonding and rapport, the okay, not okay theory that we were talking about?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, let me tell you, one of the people on my sales team did exactly what you told him not to do. He was in a client's office and he saw a picture of the individual that they were selling to, and he had caught a 70-pound fish of some sort. And when he came in, observation, hey, that's awesome. Where'd you catch that? What size was the fish? 70 pounds. And the guy that I had trained went 180 degrees the wrong direction and said, oh my God, I was down there. I caught 120-pound fish when I was out fishing. And in that moment of trying to find common ground, he just outdid the prospect. And what do you think happens when we try to outdo the prospect?
Kind of shut down and they're going to back off.
They're done.
Yeah.
They're done. Have you ever had a conversation with somebody and you go, you know what, I just am not connecting with this. There's something there. It's, you know, maybe you guys say that about me. That's a possibility. I know a lot of people say that, but thank you for smiling, Allison. But we sometimes think that that outdoing creates that further bond, but it makes that person feel less. And it blows the rapport, any rapport that we've developed at that point. And again, there's that example of the okay, not okay theory. And I'll get out, you know, I know we've got a couple people, so we're going to start calling on people. I know Kevin or Rachel, maybe somebody else wants to jump in here. Let's imagine you have a friend, everybody has a friend or a family member like this. Let's imagine you are taking a family vacation. Andy, play along with me. You're going to Los Angeles, right? And you're telling me all about it. And I say, hey, Andy, how long are you going for? How long are you going for?
Just 2 days, Dave.
2 days? Oh man, you got to spend at least a week in Los Angeles to see all the things. And where are you going for dinner?
Yeah, I can't afford that. But we'll probably do the In-N-Out. You ever been to In-N-Out Burger?
Oh man, you can do that for lunch, but for dinner, you should go over here. I mean, this place, it's worth the spend. Everybody knows someone like that, right? Quick show of hands. Does everybody know somebody like that? They always, Scott's like, yes. Scott's like not hesitating.
It's my father-in-law.
Don't share this video with him. Michael, you're smiling. You know somebody like this?
That's uncomfy, Scott.
Good friend of mine. I don't even know how he could twist any conversation to one up. It's hysterical. It's actually, I feel like he's a little mentally ill at some points.
Well, this is one of the videos we may not send out after today. We all know somebody like that. And in the world of sales, we're often doing that. We sometimes say, hey, let me tell you, about my story. We manage to flip something back to ourselves. Now, we all know somebody like that, and we say, hey, I would never want to be like that. I think in general, most of us wouldn't want to do that. But I think there are times we have to be aware that will make our prospect feel not okay. It'll make them feel lesser. And when we burn that bridge, as Ben said, well, we ain't getting the business at that point. I know, Ben, I'm twisting your words a little bit, but there goes that commonality, and people buy from people who they like and who they trust. All of a sudden, that high level of like is coming way down. Quick story, and then we'll keep moving here. Just to set an example of how dangerous this could be. A couple of years back, we were replacing our heating and air conditioning system in our house. So we had, there's a company, I live outside of Princeton, there's a company in Princeton. I'm like, I really would like to do business with them. I've heard great things. I know the owner. It would probably be great to, and I don't know him well enough to say, yeah, he's the guy, but I've heard great things. Bring them in. The guy's telling me all about the heating and air conditioning unit. And I said, I got to ask you a question, because it's definitely a little bit more expensive than I'm expecting. I said, I got to ask you a question. Is this the right unit for my house? And he goes, let me tell you, I have the same unit in my house, and my house is about 30% bigger than yours. And I said, check him off the list because we're not buying from him. And at that moment, as a guy who teaches Sandler, I go, there goes all the bonding and rapport. Some people go, you know what, maybe that's a good selling technique. But those, what we think are good selling techniques, could rub people the wrong way. In my observation, he's probably lost a lot of deals by saying things like that. Because forget about the unit. The moment you told me that your house was 30% bigger than mine, I'm going, what am I doing wrong here? How come he's got a bigger house? So that's what starts to happen. And we've got to be aware there are moments we can make somebody feel not good about their situation. And I forget who said it earlier, but think about it. Some of us, depending upon the business we work in, people might share some real negative stuff. Oh my God, we've really got a problem. I'm going to get fired or losing money, whatever it is. What we want to do is nurture those folks, make them feel that their situation is fixable. Hey, we can make it better. I've seen worse. Do things like that, as opposed to traditional salesperson. That sounds pretty bad. I don't know how we're going to fix this. And all of a sudden that person feels like the end is coming. Make people feel better about their situation. Make them feel okay about their situation. Develop rapport. We will get better sales outcomes. No question about it. Any questions or thoughts here, or any little nuggets that you guys want to share? I did, I'm not moving quick enough here, but I'll play that when we don't get. Everybody heard the crickets, right? Okay. Just making sure. No questions, no clarification. All right.
Well, I guess sometimes it can be a little tough if I can be a little passionate about certain things I talk about, and I always try to be more conscious of not coming off like, sort of like what we're talking about. if you know what I mean. But it could be a little tough sometimes. You know, you take it down a peg. You know, sometimes I get a little passionate about what I'm talking about. You know. So
Yeah,
that's-
and also, Michael, that's that matching and mirroring. If we get, now again, we can slice and dice this 1,000 different ways, but if I get more excited about something that my client's not or prospect isn't,
Right.
that could feel a little bit awkward. But it also it's very situational. For Michael, where are you from? You're from Virginia?
Well, and initially actually from Staten Island, but now I'm
Okay.
out in Pennsylvania.
Oh, you're in PA. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're not a Yankee fan, are you?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm a more football guy, but I'm actually a Cowboy fan. I never fit it anywhere. So between
right.
Philly and Giants, yeah.
Yeah.
You're darn right you don't.
So if you guys want to see the okay, not okay theory, we've got a Cowboy fan. How many Eagle fans do we have? We got a few Eagle fans, right? We got some Giant fans. Scott, what team? Oh, Scott's Giants. All right. So Mike, you're in a bad spot here. We're okay, not okay goes out the window today.
Right.
Michael, you're not a Stephen A fan, I'm gonna guess.
Yeah.
All right.
You mean I'm the only Jets fan in here?
You're the
You got
only
Bri- you
Jets
got
fan
Brian
anywhere. You
Burns.
kidding me?
Good job on Aaron Rodgers, though. I'll take you
Yeah, we good. We have him now.
Super Bowl.
that.
There you go. There you go. All right. And again, sports is a great topic for okay, not okay, and bonding and rapport. Some folks don't connect on sports, some do, and it's that can be a real breaker as well. And back to Michael, back to your point about passion. I'm very passionate about sports. A lot of my clients may not be that into it. I gotta tone that down a little bit. All right, let's move. We're gonna move very quick here. And here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna lay out something called DISC. And I know that there's some familiarity on this call with DISC. Maybe even, God bless you, Jess, maybe even a little bit more familiar for other folks. But outside of this session, Andy and I will be sending our different folks a DISC questionnaire and then do a separate session to really get under the hood of DISC. DISC is another game changer. I want to go back to Ben, because you laid it out perfectly. People like to buy from people who are like them and who they trust. And DISC is a great way to create rapport and to make those connections. So for starters, DISC is very simple. Quick show of hands, who is familiar with DISC or Myers-Briggs? Okay, so we got a few folks. All right, cool. That's a good amount. All that DISC is a tool to identify the communication preferences that each of us have. And it's 4 different quadrants. And it's pretty consistent around whatever system you're using, whether it's Myers-Briggs or whether it's DISC. The 4 quadrants are D, which is a driver. So up here, we've got a driver. We have an I down here who is an influencer, and you might be familiar with different terms, but we'll define these in a moment. We have an S, which is a steady relator, and we have a C, which is someone who is compliant. In each one of these quadrants, we might find a higher percentage of our communication preferences. Most people generally have 2 or 3 of these elements baked into their communication style, but often one of those stands out more than the others, and we've got to be aware of that. So if we understand our communication style, what we can begin to do is identify the communication style of the person across the table or across the Zoom. And more importantly, that matching and mirroring becomes super impactful. If I understand that Allison is an I, then I can meet her in the I space, even though that may not be my preference. I can just act a little bit more like that for the time that we're together to build that connection. And then over time, as we start to make that connection, our relationship can continue to build at that point. So in each of these, there are characteristics that define each one of them. So for example, in the world of a driver, there are going to be some characteristics that make up what a driver looks like. Based upon the name that it's given, does anybody want to take a stab on what a couple of characteristics might be for someone who's a D style?
Someone who likes to control the conversation.
Absolutely. What else?
Maybe like
Decisive.
clear,
Yes,
clear
what's the style?
objectives, purpose.
Hold on, I missed somebody.
Come on, Jess.
Clear objectives, purpose for the call, you know, like have standards laid out ahead of time.
Boom. They know exactly what to do, Kevin. Jess, what were you saying?
Yeah, I just said decisive.
This absolutely decisive. So if I'm dealing with a decisive person, I can't be wishy-washy. Stephanie, stay off mute, come back.
Oh, I was just gonna say they're usually very direct.
They're direct. Yes. Would you stop talking? I just want to make a decision here. They are direct. By the way, very small percentage of the population. If my memory serves me right, it's about 11, 12% of the population is a D style. And oftentimes they rub people the wrong way. Oftentimes that's one of the criticisms. On the flip side, they're awesome because they're decisive. They know, as Kevin said, they set out clear objectives. They can drive home the decision. We often believe that salespeople are drivers that are Ds. The reality is it's a small percentage of the population. Oftentimes, in my experience, Allison, you'll love this, dealing with lots of financial advisors, they all act as if they are Ds. And then once you get to know them, they're never Ds, they're often Is and really worried about how you care. But they put on a great show to make you think that they are very driven and very decisive in what they do. A little bit of a game until you break them down.
Yeah, Brandy mentioned that in one of our first meetings about advisors. Like she had mentioned, like you're gonna find that out, you know, the more calls you make, and in Sandler.
Yeah, they're cupcakes at the end of the day, which most people are. Any questions about the Ds? Okay, the Is are influencers. So I'm gonna just give a little bit more of a tip here. Whoops. These are your social folks. So what are some characteristics of people that are social?
Charming.
Outgoing.
They
Emotional.
want to be loved. That is, they try to do what it takes to please other people.
Ooh, pleasers. By the way, when we see people, and Jess, I love it, they are more emotional. Prakash, they want to be loved. They are people pleasers. So they will knock themselves out for people. About 34% of the population. So we know there's a lot of salespeople that are influencers. We also know that when we're talking to prospects, there might be a higher percentage of the population that are influencers. But we've got to be careful as an influencer. We see these folks and we say, Scott, I'm only calling you. I don't know if you're an I, but Scott can, all right, Scott can talk to anybody. He's outgoing. He's going to be great at sales. But at the same time, Scott may have to catch himself not to overtalk a situation. Scott, you're in the technology space, correct?
Advising, yeah, somewhat.
Somewhat. Your buyers might be more compliant, more worried about the end results. Therefore, they may not be as talkative. So we got to be aware of that. Our job is to identify what they are and make the adaptation to their world, not to get them to adapt to our world. Great definitions. Steady relator, S style. Anybody want to take a stab in the dark at a couple of characteristics for these folks?
They're usually patient.
They are patient.
Submissive.
Can be, and not always in a negative way. I mean, sometimes they take stuff in, sometimes dialed way back, sometimes dialed up. Yep. What else?
Supportive.
Always supportive.
I'd wager a guess they're observant.
And you would win that bet?
Willing to help.
Stephanie, what do you got?
They're usually very calm and like collective and like can bring the situation to you. You feel like you can't read them because they're so calm and they're just like, this is what it is. They're like steady.
Sometimes they're so steady. These are sometimes folks, you go to a meeting, in the company, we had a meeting, we had 12 people. Boy, Joe over there hasn't said a word. I wish he'd speak up more, because when he speaks up or she speaks up, they have brilliance. They're taking everything in. The eye spits things out and people go, I wish the eye would just keep his or her mouth quiet, because they just keep randomly throwing stuff out. But that's how we operate, and that's okay. We should be aware of it as business people, as communicators, just in general, or when we're out selling. But we've got to be aware. Sometimes, and I forget who said it earlier, that steady relator may not be as energetic, may just be taking information in. They want to make sure while they're being supportive, that you'll be supportive back. Remember, you want to meet them in their world. We can help these folks by the way, which one of these would be the best salesperson at this point? Who wants to guess?
Driver?
It depends on who you've identified you're potentially selling to determine that.
Yeah, generally it doesn't matter, because they all come with strengths and they all come with opportunities to improve, and it's always about meeting your prospect in their world. So there may not be one that stands out as being the best, and we can parse that out even further. But there are some great stories at Sandler where early on it was a little bit risky for David Sandler to bring on somebody who sat on the left side of the screen here, until some Sandler people came in who were on the left side and hit it out of the park, because they used that as a strength for themselves. Let's jump up to the C's. Compliant. What do we know about compliant people?
Probably listen and ask a lot of questions.
Yes. Prakash, what do we know about compliant people?
They are the sheep. They are the sheep. They just follow whatever the shepherd tells them to do.
Well, I would say the steady relator more than that.
Prakash is a D. Yeah.
Prakash is a D. He's like
Nah, I'm more
Good
an I.
charts.
They're analytical.
Who said that?
I did.
Nice, Scott. Really nice. Analytical.
I would say they're usually very cautious.
Cautious. Anybody else?
And they're also private, so they're harder to like get that relationship of like knowing more about them. Like at least people that I know that have this as like their dominant, they generally are harder to like peel that onion back to get to know them past like whatever the relationship's supposed to be.
100%, Stephanie.
Yeah.
So maybe a little bit harder to develop rapport. So I go out on a sales meeting, I'm an ID, DI, depending upon the day, but I go out to a high C and I want to have a great conversation and he or she is pulling back. I've got to lower my tonality. I've got to slow things down. I've got to understand what their world is doing to them. We sometimes speak a little bit of a different language. My job is to meet them in their world. Years ago, we're working with a financial services firm. It actually was the owner, because it was a family-owned business. The owner, I would be meeting with him, or I was meeting with him. Off the chart C. He was a retired lawyer, young guy, but left the law field to go into the family business of financial services. I walked into his office. The office was as clean as you could. I walked into his office, desk clear, the bookshelf in the back completely untouched, a computer sitting on top of a file cabinet, and he goes, I just got back from Chicago. My apologies for the mess. I looked around the room and I was like, oh my God, this guy's an off the chart C. Whatever I had my iPad, I kept it on my lap. Because if I put that on his desk at that moment, I would have blown all rapport. I would have blown it at that moment. I see clean desk. I got to keep my stuff as neat and orderly as possible. And that's what we're looking to do in this situation. So when you look around the wheel, for those that have done this, when you look around the quadrants, you kind of know where you are. For those that have never done disc, again, Andy and I will be doing some breakouts on disc, but think about what might be your more dominant. Now you might say, hey, I'm pretty high in that eye, but I've got a little bit of that. That can be true. We usually bleed or blend into the different areas. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3 of those areas. It's important. Think about the building blocks here. And when we do the questionnaire, they're pretty accurate. They're anywhere from 70 to 90% accurate based upon how you respond. But when you start to understand your communication style, and then more importantly, start to identify the communication style of others, you will then start to meet them in their world. And this goes beyond the world of sales. This is human communication. Some people are very good at doing this. They naturally can just blend into any one of these. Some people need to do a little bit of just awareness training, be aware of it. But this will create better conversations in your home, in your business, wherever you are, to understand where people are. All right. So step 1 was, there's no rocket science in bonding and rapport. I find that with most salespeople, by the way, we've worked with a few over the years where they will never bond with anybody. And they are typically volume-based salespeople. But for most of us, nothing earth-shattering here. So usually some good reminders and maybe a couple of nuggets where you walk away and go, hey, I never thought of it that way. But the key is that rapport is critical in the world of sales. And this element of DISC, as we get deeper into it, we're kind of doing like a level 1 here. That can be a game changer in the world of sales. Let me stop my share for a moment here. I'll send this document out. I'll save it. Let me stop my recording.